Haven't talked to you since you got back from Egypt.
Yes.
You look better. You look like you've recovered.
Yeah, yeah, man, well, you remember the crazy text message. I mean, like some of those days were just intense as hell.
Yeah, I'm
And listening
sure.
to those stories over and over, like, man, I don't really have problems. They have much big. I'm cool.
Yeah,
Everything's
sure.
fine.
I bet. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the audio podcast, Daily Tech News Show, and this is the video of us recording it. Dan Patterson is going to record it with me today. You ready to do this, brother?
I'm ready to do it.
All right, here we go.
Support for the Daily Tech News Show is provided by Patreons like you at patreon.com/acedetect. This is FPN, the Frog Pants Network.
This is the Daily Tech News for Thursday, May 8th, 2014. I'm Tom Merritt. Joining me today, very happy to have Dan Patterson, technologist and journalist, man about the world, literally. Thanks for joining me, Dan.
Hey, it's great to be here, Tom.
Dan just got back from doing some pretty interesting stuff over in Egypt, training some media makers. We're going to talk about that a little later in the show. But you're an old radio guy, man, so do you mind doing some headlines with me?
I'd love to do some headlines.
All right, here we go. The Next Web reports Snapchat agreed to a consent decree with the U.S. FTC over a database leak and misrepresentation of how the service stored user messages. Snapchat had said photos and videos would, quote, disappear forever in their marketing materials, although, as we all know, there are many ways to work around that disappearing. Snapchat changed its privacy policy, its app description, its in-app notifications. Its agreement with the FTC requires that it create a privacy program and subject itself to independent monitoring for the next 20 years, as well as promising to stop misrepresenting how it handles user data.
Yes, big quote unquote. I wonder if my phone number can disappear from those databases
Forever.
somehow. Yes, forever. Reuters reports that Samsung replaced the head of its mobile design team, Chang Dong-hoon, who offered to resign last week. Lee Min-hook will take over the role. Chang will now focus on the design strategy team, which is responsible for long-term design across all Samsung businesses. Lee has been a rising star at Samsung, becoming the company's youngest senior executive in 2010 for his role in designing the Galaxy series of phones.
Or as iPhone calls it, ripping off our design.
Right.
Reuters reports more than 100 technology companies, including Google, Facebook, Twitter, and Amazon, signed a letter to the U.S. FCC opposing proposed open internet guidelines. Those are the ones you've been hearing about that would allow commercially reasonable traffic discrimination. The letter called the rules a grave threat to the internet and called for a delay in their proposal. A meeting is still scheduled for May 15th, which would make the proposal official and then open the guideline for a public comment period. Wednesday, Republican Commissioner Ajit Pai joined his colleague Democrat Jessica Rosenworcel in calling for the agency to delay the release of a notice of proposed rulemaking that would set off the creation of the rules. So now we've got dissension within the commissioners.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch how this shakes down and see if it hits partisan lines at some
It might
point.
never even make it to a proposal at this point.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Ars Technica reports Nintendo plans to release a low-priced game console targeted towards emerging markets. Nintendo President Satoru Iwata spoke to the press following an investor briefing Wednesday, but didn't give details on the new hardware or what countries it would be released in. Nintendo also announced the Nintendo Figurine platform, featuring collectible toys that share data with a variety of Nintendo games using NFC. What kind of data can be shared between a toy and a game? I guess.
Well, it's like Skylanders. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah. All right,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Right.
It's essentially Nintendo's like, well, our Nintendo Wii U sucks, so let's make some money off the developing market. That's what smartphone companies do when they fail. Yeah.
Yes.
The Verge reports Epic Games announced the next Unreal tournament will be completely free and developed in the open. The development will be led by senior Epic Game programmers, but anyone can contribute. The company plans to use forums as well as Twitch streams and a GitHub repository to manage all that stuff. Company plans to make money off of a forthcoming online marketplace where they'll help people to sell their user-generated mods and content.
Boy, this is a real interesting push towards, I mean, it's not exactly Minecraft, but towards that, like, let's make games open thing. This could be pretty cool.
It seems to me to be the smart, like, well, we can't actually stop the piracy, so let's open up the engine. Let's open up the development. Let's make money off of running the store. That seems like a sounder way to do it.
Recode reports executives from Comcast and Time Warner appeared before the U.S. House Judiciary Committee. Most of the questions asked what the benefit to consumers would be. Comcast replied that the combined company would deliver a significantly improved consumer experience, but not lower prices. Representative Blake Farenthold of Texas noted that the combined company would serve 91% of Hispanic households and asked for assurances the company would not discriminate against non-Comcast NBC Spanish-speaking programming.
It would be so Comcast to be like, look, we're not gonna lower prices, but we'll finally give you decent service.
We'll give you kind of what you're already paying for now.
Yeah, we'll follow through on that. We promise.
Right. We promise.
The next web reports Japanese messaging app Line reported revenues have increased 223% over the past year and 19% over the past quarter. How are they making all that money off a messaging app? Stickers is what you always hear, but there's more to it than that. Line has more than 420 million registered users, makes half its revenue from in-app purchases, mostly related to the 30 games connected to the messaging app. Line also makes money from advertisers who can push messages to the followers. It's an ask for thing. Like you say, I would like to have advertising sent to me from these brands. In fact, Paul McCartney, for instance, has more followers, almost twice as many followers on Line than he does on Twitter. And Line has been piloting flash sales through the app as well. And also stickers. They do make money off stickers.
Yes. Right. Well, these private messaging apps, when we saw that sale of WhatsApp to Facebook, it was almost here in the West like a head scratcher. And then, overseas, everybody's using Line or WhatsApp or Wicker, which is just, you see this explosive growth of things that are broadcast and opt-in as opposed to like a timeline and a news model.
Time for some news from you. These are things submitted to our subreddit, as are a lot of our headlines, but I like to highlight several of them each day. Subreddit is at dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com, so get in there and do some voting, do some submitting. Join the thousands, literally 2,000, almost 3,000 people in there who have subscribed to the subreddit. Angryfuture is one of those. He submitted the top story on our subreddit today from Tweaktown. Now, I also found it reported on Ars Technica with a little more research involved. Lawyers for MediaBridge Products, they make wireless devices, they make routers, sent a letter to a Redditor called Treevely Monday threatening to sue unless he deleted a negative Amazon review of a MediaLink wireless router. MediaBridge's attorney Neil Jacobs says Treevely's review was a campaign to damage, discredit, defame, and libel MediaBridge. And then the internet exploded.
Wow, right, the internet, right. I think we might see more of these pushback lawsuits. Companies are now looking at customer reviews as something that can be pretty libelous and hurtful to the brand. That's really interesting. toddkam posted the Business Week article about a group from Université Laval in Quebec, I know, I slaughtered that, who won Shell's Eco Marathon in America's competition with a car that achieved 2,824 miles per gallon. If that impresses you, it shouldn't. Last year, the same school achieved 3,587 miles per gallon.
I still didn't find out why it went down, yeah.
The car, which competed in the prototype class of the competition, has a teardrop shape and is not built for comfort or speed.
Yeah, takes a long time. But you could literally go from Los Angeles to New York on 1 gallon of gas, less than a gallon of gas.
Very efficient, if not comfortable.
Crazy. No, but you would have a bad back. Spydrchick submitted the Gawker story that a band from L.A. called Wolfpack racked up $20,000 in royalties from Spotify. They figured it out. Everybody's like, can't make money off Spotify. Well, Wolfpack can. They made an album called Sleepify and then asked fans to stream the entirely silent album through the night as they slept, racking up plays for Wolfpack at 0.007 cents per track. Fans typically could generate about $3 a night for the band, and with enough nights and enough fans, they racked up $20,000 worth of royalties. Spotify spokesman Graham James had a little bit of a sense of humor, saying, Sleepify seems derivative of John Cage's work. Spotify has also made the band remove the album for violating terms of service, and we'll see if they actually get paid. Royalties usually follow like 2 months later, but Clever.
Very clever. It reminds me of the opposite of metal machine music. You know, at the end of that vinyl, there's a little click track that will jump the needle back and repeat the record over and over of screeching noise. Right.
Yeah.
This is like the opposite of that. Hacking the system for sure.
Yeah. Good job, Wolfpack. I hope you get your royalties, but I'm betting you won't. We'll see. That's the news from you. Hey, it's Thursday again, folks. That means it's time for a bad teacher plug. Producer Jenny Josephson's husband, Matt, wrote on the show and would deeply enjoy the chance to keep writing for its next season. So if you can at all, tune your DVR and your television to CBS at 9:30 tonight. Watch the show. Tweet about it with the hashtag #BadTeacher. And for the cord killers among you, full episodes are available Friday morning at cbs.com/shows/bad-teacher. Any of that helps Matt, which helps Jenny, which helps us. So please. Just give a little eyeball attention. All right, let's talk about what you've been up to, man, because this was pretty crazy. And you mentioned Wicker in the headlines. We were communicating over Wicker. This is a secure way of communicating. I was blown away by what you were up to. You were in Egypt training Sudanese media makers. Is that right?
Yeah, so I traveled and worked with a group called Small World News, and they go to places like Libya or Syria, Iraq, Iran, and Egypt in this case. We're trying to avoid using the word activist, although perhaps some of their activities could resemble that. And this was a handpick. We worked with an NGO in the area and started planning this in December or so this year, and handpicked a group of around a dozen people who had a history of some sort of, again, I don't want to say activism because that could get them in trouble in Sudan, but activist type of behavior. At least they were shown some sort of desire to speak up or speak out, share their culture or language, and selected them to join our program for 2 weeks. We were in Cairo training them the fundamentals of journalism, storytelling, and using a mobile device to do these things, an Android phone that we put cyanogen mod on, and took them through this process of, the storytelling is one thing, but really it's how do you use this thing that is always on, it's always in your pocket, to record stories from a very violent place, but to do it in such a way so that you don't attract attention, so that your communication isn't interrupted or intercepted, and the basics of fundamentals of security that we talk about on shows like this pretty frequently.
Yeah, and listening to the audio that you captured, you had some pretty good audio diaries that you posted up at Dan Patterson. Is it danpatterson.com?
Yeah.
One of the quotes from one of the people you were talking with was, "Sometimes the camera is more dangerous than a gun."
Yeah, it was pretty incredible. This stuff. So these are people who are able to communicate with some degree of English, usually through broken Arabic, and I would try my best in Arabic. And we sat around. We had a good opportunity to get to know these people, and we would sit around at breakfast and we would drink coffee and just chat. And sometimes these discussions turned into longer talks about music or culture or dance and that kind of thing. But we ended up having this conversation where one of our students said, Dan, my brother, he is dead. My father, he is dead. I was in the war, and I'm lucky I survived. Now I'm in my home in Kordofan. The Kordofan Mountains kind of are in south-central Sudan. And this is where you will see those very typical photos of Nubian, very black people dancing with amazing paint and jewelry. And that is his region of Africa. And they are in conflict with the North. And he said, well, they come down and they take our guns. And then they separate us, and they make sure that one tribe or one region that's over the hill from the other can't talk to each other. And this is what they've been doing for thousands of years, hundreds of years. And all of a sudden, we have these phones, we have these things, and we can show each other, not just the outside world, because to you, wherever you are is the world. They're able to communicate across groups, much like walkie-talkies, right? And they're able to preserve their music and culture and dance. And this, the guy was telling me this, and he leaned back in his chair. He had no idea how this would resonate in the West or what a statement like this would really mean. But he sat back in his chair and picked up his phone. We brought them Samsung Galaxy phones, took a drag on a cigarette and said, Dan, sometimes the phone and the camera can be more powerful than the gun. Like, incredible, man. Incredible.
And certainly not the first person to say it, but
Right.
definitely somebody who knows what it means more than most people who may have
Yeah.
said it,
Right.
actually.
And coming from, yeah, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, this is an extreme example of mobile phones changing the landscape, and a very poignant example. But it's changing the landscape all over Africa.
Yeah, it's what's really interesting is that, you and I and all the people listening to and watching these shows, like we love this stuff. We know technology, and often we are evangelists to our friends and family, and we show all kinds of useful stuff that can help them make their lives more fun, interesting, convenient, and that kind of stuff. But what we're really engaged in here in spreading technology is really the democratization of the dissemination of information. The more this spreads, the more it spreads to places outside of where our friends and family live. And these things, these same applications that we use to take snapshots here, are used to share not just the politics or the violence, but to share and preserve culture. I mean, one of the really interesting things is that, music and dance is used to communicate more than just the sentiments and the emotion of the music and song. It's used to communicate, in oral traditions, history and politics and the things that matter to a culture. So often when groups are marginalized, they're separated from each other so they can't share this kind of stuff. And the mobile phone really, Instagram is incredible, that is the new walkie-talkie.
And if you don't believe that music and dance are essential to a cultural identity, go tell someone their band sucks that they like, not the band they're in, the band they like.
Right.
And you can tell right away that is fundamental across cultures. It may be, and I've already seen a couple of reactions in the chat room here of people saying, "Yeah, we need to get them iPhones, we need to get them faster data, unlimited data." And I'm not saying that those aren't good ideas. However, there's a lot going on in Africa with what's there. Just having the ability to communicate across distance rather cheaply is incredible what they're doing with feature phones. I've talked before about government transparency, the ability to get information from the government, have the government get information to its people. There's lots of agricultural uses. There's medical communication that's happening, health communication that's happening. A few examples that I was just looking around. And honestly, I spent a little bit of time looking around for examples, and you can find tons of them. One of the most famous is M-Pesa. It's M-PESA. It's a mobile platform for banking. You will find hundreds of articles about how this has revolutionized banking, especially in rural areas of the developing world. Were any of these folks using M-Pesa for anything? It seems like it's more popular in other regions of Africa than maybe Sudan.
I didn't see M-Pesa, but you make a very good point about low bandwidth uses. Oftentimes SMS is just as powerful as a video or anything else when it's used to communicate stuff. In Nairobi, there was a war was fought in Nairobi in 2007 and 2008 using only SMS. And I think that, we look at, yes, messaging apps are very important for interpersonal communication, but they can also store a lot of stuff that is pretty incriminating. Whereas SMS is something that on your device itself is pretty easy to get rid of. Another thing to consider with faster data or more data is that all of the data networks there are mined like you wouldn't believe. So in Cairo, there are 2 cell phone towers. All of the traffic goes through 2 towers. And one of the reasons we are using Wicker is that we're sending this encrypted over Wi-Fi. We never touched a data network. And in large part, some of our lessons, I don't know if I can share the screen grabs from this, but I have pictures of our the whiteboards that we used. And we taught often that when you touch that data network, all of a sudden your location and identity can be triangulated pretty quickly and pretty easily. And if you're sending big things through data, even if you turn Tor on and you use a mobile network, you kind of stand out like a red flag. So right now, the best data network is a Wi-Fi network.
Decentralized networks, I think, are going to be developed and improved upon in situations like that. Situations like Sudan, like Syria, maybe even Ukraine, but certainly Turkey. Iran, as people try to figure out ways to route around. That's what the internet does. It routes around, not just the technology, but the culture always figures out a way to route around things. But even on the less controversial systems, just a few more examples. Mama is text and voice info for pregnant women. M-Farm, this one I hadn't heard of before. It's kind of like M-Pesa, but M-Farm sends price info to farmers on their feature phones, connects them with buyers, so that they can tell when the best time to sell their crops is, who the best person to sell their crops to is, and what crops are the best to plant.
Yeah. And that, that speed is something that may be very crucial, where, we don't see entirely competitive marketplaces over there like we do here, obviously, but we do see this kind of homegrown value and aesthetic where people really are growing their own commodities and they are trading them in reasonably local markets. And speed, access to information and communication, all of those things are really key. Another very interesting thing that we uncovered was the value of Google versus other networks. Often communication apps like Viper were used because of their utility, but they were constantly worried that this would be shut down because it's it's an Israeli company. The same thing when Facebook purchased WhatsApp. Everyone I encountered was looking for that next app. Most of them seemed to move over to Line, but they're very worried because of Facebook's relationship with the government. However, Google was baked into our threat model as a safe location to store data because many people reiterated this to me, including some journalists who worked at, we visited a news organization, and, they said, look, the government here is almost all powerful. They can kick Facebook out. They can kick other people out. They can't kick Google out. They can't function without Google. And so this is like the only place that we trust to store our data.
That is both frightening and encouraging at the same time. It sort of depends on what you think of Google's corporate personality and the intentions of the people who run it and control it. And Larry Page and Sergey Brin have taken steps to make sure that they stay in control of that company. Then you have to trust Larry Page and Sergey Brin at that point. But that is very interesting to think of Google as sort of the one that can't be controlled. Because remember, Google tried to go into China and then backed out because they couldn't do it on their own terms. Facebook has never gone into China. They can't strike a deal, even though they actually make some money off China. It's all outside of China's borders. They are banned in China, and they haven't cooperated there yet, unlike Microsoft, unlike Apple. So that is interesting about Google is sort of, I've often referred to Google as its own country, and that sounds like Google acting that way in that situation.
Yeah, what I'd like to learn is, the fly-on-the-wall diplomacy, those conversations that must be had between Google execs and government officials from places like Egypt and Sudan. Yeah.
What are the negotiating levers?
Yeah, right.
Pulled. Well, right before we finish this topic, I do want to mention a Guardian story that I found about the rise in literacy because of mobile phones. UNESCO had a report. They surveyed 5,000 people in 7 countries: Ethiopia, Ghana, India, Kenya, Nigeria, Pakistan, and Zimbabwe. 62% of the respondents are reading more now that they can read on mobile phones. A third read to children from their phones, and 90% said they expect to spend more time reading from phones in the next year. 77% of the mobile readers in developing countries are male, but women spend an average of 207 minutes per month reading on their mobile phones compared to men spending 33 minutes. But overall, mobile phones, forget desktops, forget laptops, mobile phones they're just skipping right to them, and not even smartphones in most cases. These mobile phones that they're reading on are Nokia feature phones using a World Reader compressed data app.
Yeah, Nokia and Samsung. I mean, the Samsung is obviously not the feature phone, but they're really close with some of those low-end phones, and they're not doing crazy stuff with them. Simply the ability to send SMS is tremendous. But reading, right? I mean, I've often made this argument here in the States of what happens when you give millions of people who are either economically marginalized or lower income, and you give them the ability to consume some of the greatest works of literature of all time for free. And the effect that this has had in the United States is huge. Scale this across the world, and it's tremendous.
Yeah. And granted, they're reading romances, they're
Right.
reading novels, but they're also reading Chinua Achebe, and they're also reading historical tracts. It's interesting to see like what the most popular books are there. Real quickly, checking on the calendar, the only thing we have today is to wish a happy birthday to the metric system. It was on this day in 1790 that the French National Assembly acted on a motion from Bishop Talleyrand, that's how long ago this was, to create a stable decimal system of measurement units that eventually evolved into the metric system. So 1790, 1990. So we're talking about, what would it be? Mega anniversary. I'm trying to think in metric terms here, but get on the stick, Liberia and the United States. And what's the other country? There's like 3 that don't use the metric system. Happy birthday, metric system.
Someday.
Most everyone loves you. Our pick of the day comes from Ashish Bhagawat, who said, hey, use Todoist for your task list management. With a pretty minimalistic interface, the app can be as simple or as complex as you want. No mean feat in this day and age. It has native clients available for virtually every platform out there, as well as an offline mode in the web app, which is just icing on the cake. I use Simple Note for the same sort of thing, but it's kind of what you get into. That ability to have cross-platform and web access, I think, is key to any kind of to-do list system. Do you have a favorite to-do list system, Dan?
Yeah, I use Evernote, and I cross-pollinate it with Google Calendar. So I use If to push when I make a new event within Google Calendar over to Evernote. But I also, for simplicity's sake, I love Simple Note. Love it.
Yeah. Well, it's cross-platform, which Todoist is as well. So you might want to give it a check out on Ashish's recommendation. It's todoist.com. All right, let's finish out with some good emails here. Got one from Shelby, who says, one common argument against the FCC plan to allow tiering is that it might stifle innovation, but will it? The argument goes that tiering will degrade the capacity of the slower tier so that you have lots of bits competing for relatively limited throughput. If these artificial roadblocks last long enough and are significant, painful enough, they will encourage new and possibly better compression formats or related delivery technologies that don't require the same throughput. In the longer run, we might even see alternatives to copper-based delivery, radio, satellite, mesh, etc. emerge. The gas crunch of the 1970s brought us more efficient cars, alternative fuel vehicles, and ultimately social and structural changes like urban redesigns that feature walking, cycling, and mass transit. Maybe Wheeler will go down in history as the father of the next great innovation in communication technology, after which Shelby writes, cricket, cricket, cricket. Or maybe just a money-grubbing buffoon in the pocket of his former industry brethren. Those are Shelby's words. I'm sure there's a lot of other people's words as well that mimic that. And then he puts hash, and then he's got some HTML tags. He's got some markup. Robot voice, love the show, / robot voice. Shelby, thank you. Shelby's an economist and consumer, and he totally agrees that the internet should be open and unfettered. But it's an interesting point. It's sort of like finding the lemonade in the lemons there, right?
Yeah, right. And making this analogous to the gas crunch of the 70s is, I hadn't thought of that analogy. And, if you think about the oil-producing nations and the effect that had on the United States, maybe it is kind of similar.
And the gas crunch was sort of artificial. It was the OPEC countries limiting the oil, and this is artificial. We're just doing it to ourselves in this case.
So Wheeler is OPEC.
Wheeler is OPEC in this metaphor. Right. Yeah. There's so many ways I'm not going to go with that analogy. But that's interesting. And now I'm wondering who all the other players are. Paul Davidson writes, in response to Allison Sheridan earlier this week, commenting about the lack of teachers who are not adaptable to technology in their classrooms. I think it means that there are a bunch of teachers who won't adapt to technology in the classroom. Paul says, I'm just about to finish my 3rd year teaching. And while this is true, most of those teachers, referring to the unadaptable ones, are fairly close to retirement. Most of the teachers that have come into the profession within the past 15 years are actually quite adaptable to new technologies when implemented. Just give it time, and those unwilling will become a rare minority in the profession. Dan, we see that in pretty much every section of technology.
Yeah, it's it'll only they'll become more rare, right?
When you're talking about movies, when you're talking about television on the internet, when you're talking about the FCC, like it's all about like the people who have the old ideas moving on and the new
Age them
kids coming
out.
in. Yeah. These problems will often solve themselves. I mean, look at the telephone monopoly of the United States. It may have taken 50 years, but eventually they got rid of it. Although it came back, sort of. In a whole different way. And finally, Habituela Condolce wrote in, from tech smart teachers to tech refrigerators. I was listening to the show when you started talking about smart refrigerators and how you still have to tell it, the LG one we were talking about, what you are putting in it. So I was thinking, what we're discussing about using technology to get technology out of the way, why not have the point of sale print a QR code on the receipt that you can scan and sends a list of what you just purchased straight to the fridge. This way, you only have to tell the fridge when you are taking stuff out, and it will know what's running low or what's about to be expired. In return, the fridge sends you a reminder of what you should buy next, or even order it for you after confirming this. This, of course, would probably work best for big stores like Kmart, Costco, BJ's, or Walmart, but even Fresh Direct or Amazon Fresh, since they are already keeping track of what you buy. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, right. The QR code and inventory management is something that I think a lot of people have been trying to nail for a long time, but this could be a real neat implementation.
I believe that there are refrigerators, even as far back as the early 2000s, that worked on this principle of you scan the UPC code. And the fridge would then log, okay, you have that thing, and when you take it out, you scan it. But to me, the problem with all of these, whether it's on the receipt or whether it's scanning the UPC code, you have to do it.
Yeah.
The ideal system is one that when you just put something in the fridge does it and says, okay, I see that's a bottle of milk. And Amazon is working on this technology to be able to recognize a product just based on the packaging, which could totally solve this problem if it was put into your refrigerator.
Yeah, if we can OCR images and search against that, then there's I mean, recognizing a shape of something shouldn't be that challenging, right?
Yeah, the Amazon thing, it's a beta program where you get this little wand, this little device, and it just looks at the packaging and says, oh, I recognize those colors in that configuration. That must be a bottle of orange juice. So I'm gonna put that as, it's meant to fill up your Amazon shopping cart, right? But it could be, if it could be used in a refrigerator, then when you put stuff in, it could just say, oh, we got a bottle of orange juice in there, and maybe it'd be able to scan the best before date off of that somehow, or maybe it would just have a good average time for that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm with Habituela Condolce about like, let's figure out a solution to make that easier. And I know that Samsung, LG, all those white goods manufacturers are working on exactly that same thing. Something that doesn't require the retailers to be involved is the ideal situation, I feel like. Well, that's it for us. Dan Patterson, you can find his works at danpatterson.com. I highly recommend going and checking out some of the things he was doing with Small World Media are up there. Where else can people find the products of what you've been up to?
Yeah, so danpatterson.com is a good place to find some of the work. Smallworldnews.tv is the organization that I traveled with, and I've been writing around for a couple content studios here at reasonably large websites that I need to stay hush on for a little while. But writing is the name of the game these days, and maybe a couple Microsoft posts coming out soon.
All right. Well, keep an eye out for it. You could probably find him on Twitter at twitter.com/Dan Patterson.
Indeed.
If you follow him there. Thanks, man.
Well, thank you.
Sure. I also want to thank our 3,916 patrons. Man, we're getting close to 4,000. Really, really appreciate all the people who have pitched in to keep the show going and keep the show improving. We're doing our best to try, and we listen to your feedback. So bit.ly/helpdtns if you would like to give a little value for the value you're getting back from the show. Don't forget you have a voice in what stories we cover at our subreddit, dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com. You can email us. Our feedback address is feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. Give us a call. Leave us a voicemail. It's 512-59-DAILY. That's 512-593-2459. And you can listen to the show live at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Pacific on mobile.alphageekradio.com. Find all these links at dailytechnewsshow.com. We'll be back tomorrow with Darren Kitchen and Len Peralta illustrating the episode. See you then.
This podcast is part of the Frog Pants Studios Network. For more information about this and other shows, visit frogpants.com. Audio programs so good, it's like you're there.
Woo!
Hey, great.
That was a
Cool.
good conversation, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you
That
for
was
that.
a lot of fun. And yeah. Thanks for the crazy messages, man. It was just being able to communicate while we were there. We were all planning on doing going blackout, and then we were able to get on some good data networks. But
How did you settle on Wicker?
Well, initially we were going to be entirely PGP, and the same problem that always happens with PGP, which is that nobody is going to use PGP. Wicker has, their board of directors is pretty good. Cory Doctorow is on the board. So the thought was, well, we need stuff that, like Snapchat, will kill your messaging. It will, in case your phone is confiscated, it'll show no evidence.
Sort of.
Yeah, sort of.
If you're careful.
But right, if you're careful. And yeah, that has I don't know. It was probably, maybe we should have stayed like entirely by the books, but it was like we all got to communicate with our friends and family, and we have to communicate with each other. So nobody's going to use PGP.
Yeah. Well, and even on Wicker, you were fairly circumspect. I mean,
Yeah.
You were saying more than you would have said openly on the internet, but I wasn't, you weren't tipping me off to exactly where you were or what you were doing at any given point in time, even then. I mean, it's just, it's like the onion, it's layers, right?
Yeah, right. It's and a lot of that was like, we have to share this stuff, and we were sitting, using social media is actually a really great cover, because you can, look, I'm a tourist in a country that desperately needs tourists, but every day we'd go up to these classrooms and listen to these god awful stories about the terrible shit, like we need to drink and bullshit. Jesus.
Yeah, you need to come down for sure.
Yeah, right. That's exactly it. So
Yeah.
anyway, thanks for the opportunity to talk about it. I appreciate it.
Oh, sure. No, thank you for being willing to chat about it as much as you can. It's fascinating. And having that perspective, the one thing we're always looking for is that perspective that I don't have, right?
Right,
And there's plenty of them out there. And having that perspective on this Africa story, which I've talked about this sort of thing before, but being able to have you there saying like, yeah, man, I was actually meeting with people from Sudan and talking about phones and seeing the usage of phones in Africa, even if it is Egypt, still really valuable.
Well, that's something that I've really enjoyed getting out of this show in particular, and I mean that in that, like, I love tech and tech news. I have been doing it now for almost a decade, and I like the commodity stuff is just not very exciting anymore. Mm-hmm. What's exciting is when I can get a different view and a different perspective from somebody I may not have heard of who happens to be an expert on something. I mean, that's really great. Anybody can do the news of the day, but bringing that perspective in is something that, that differentiates this.
Well, I'm glad that you think so, because that's definitely what we're trying. Because part of the what the audience says is, at least some of the audience says, we're tired of hearing about an iPhone rumor. Like, like how many phone stories can you do? And that doesn't mean we're not going to ever talk about an iPhone rumor, but we're going to be pickier about it. Like, it has to seem really legit. It has to be interesting. And there's so many, and we hear this from Eric Olander. We hear it from a lot of our international guests, but even domestic guests as well. Like, there are so many stories that are really interesting that aren't getting covered. And that's so much harder to figure out, because there's also so many people out there floating BS.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, but I'm revolutionizing. It's like, well, are you really, right? So having people with direct experience is an antidote to cutting through that.
Yeah, it really is. It is. So, well, keep it up. I mean, 10,000, 11,000 now. That's great.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Cool. All right.
Well, Jenny and I just kind of hang out while I'm editing the show. So if you need to go, take off. And
I do need to go take off, but thanks again. And if I can help you with anything, let me know.
Absolutely.
Right. These stuff. So I'm. It's not official yet, but I'm writing for Gawker now, which is interesting and good.
Oh, we had actually a really good Gawker story in the news from you today. So that's cool. Congratulations.
Yeah. All right. Cool. I'll talk to you soon. All right. See you.
Well, that's weird. Oh, that's because it's silent. That's why. Trying to get to that part. There we go. All right.
Title so far, communication. It's
a feature.
Yeah. But I'm holding out for more, perhaps.
Give us some more titles, titleistas.
Yes, sir. Can I have some more titles?
You'll get nothing and like it, says the chat room.
You know. They're otherwise occupied with the Eurovision Song Contest.
Oh, yeah.
Which is totally fine.
Go, Austria.
Someday, every year when I hear about it, the Eurovision Song Contest, I'm like, next year I'll pay attention to it.
The only ones I know are the bearded Austrian lady and Molly is the UK's entry. That's all I know this year.
Molly Wood is doing a Eurovision song?
No, it's just Molly, not Molly Wood.
Okay. Because that would be awesome.
All right, I need the title. I'm exporting.
I need a title, people. All right, now I have to go look.
Communication, it's a feature. It's going to be it.
All right, let's see.
Nth Mike's going to win.
This consent decree will disappear in 7 seconds. Too long.
Little long, little obtuse. I admire it, though. African amazing. The gods must be crazy mobile. I think that one's better said.
That's better said.
Even North Africa has better peering.
Oh boy.
QNX Monkey does not like that I was cheering for Austria. Sorry, man. I kind of like communication. It's a feature. It's not bad.
Yeah.
All right. You win this round, Nth Mike.
Good for you, Nth Mike. First and best.
First in show.
Oh. I knew I'd wake T2 up. Eurovision final on Saturday. Okay. In America or on Eurovision.tv?
Oh yeah, I don't know where it's showing here.
I would imagine on the interwebs. Just a thought. That was a good show, by the way, today.
Oh, good. Finally.
You can generally assume I like all of your shows unless you hear otherwise from me.
No,
and
I
you
know.
do. You do. No, all the shows are good until otherwise stated.
Right. Finally, a good show. Woo. I'm just exporting right now.
No, we missed phone is mightier than the gun. Too late.
Well, it's not exact. Phone is mightier than... The phone is mightier than the gun.
I feel like that sets off lots of gun things. I like to... It just sets... There's like lots of gun... I don't know. I kind of like communication. It's a feature.
All right. We'll stick with that. Phone is mightier than the gun. I don't know. It's kind of controversial, though. I'm going to write it down.
Yeah. Write it down. Let's see.
I get what you're saying about putting gun in anything.
Anything with a gun. I don't know. That's just my old school crabby journalist reaction.
And Mike's like, no, you can't take away.
No.
I already bowed. Hawkwood, are you some kind of unholy merging of Hawkito and Brian Brushwood, or just a coincidence?
Yeah,
Phone's not friendly fire.
I like, the reason I like phone is mightier than the gun is because it's all about what we talked about.
That's my attraction to it as well. It actually
Yeah.
it catches your eye, and you're like, ooh, I wonder what. And that is the main thrust.
That
of
is
the
the main
show.
thrust of it. And also, it might turn out to be true. So
Right.
that's another benefit. So, and to Mike, man, I'm so sorry.
It's a time-tested
possible.
template. You know, pen is mightier than the sword, sort of thing.
Yeah. Should we say the phone is mightier than the gun? Just go for the full.
The phone is mightier than the gun. Yeah, let's do that. And Mad Marv, we're not saying we would never use the word gun in a title. It's just that sometimes if you're not careful using the word gun in a title, you invite a debate about something that you were not trying to have a debate about. But I don't think that's the case here.
Yeah. It becomes.
We're just thinking it through. I mean, if we were talking about 3D printing guns, we would not shy away from it at all. That's what it's about. You just want to make sure that you're not bringing a knife title to a gun title. You know? No? That metaphor doesn't squish into that? He brought a knife to a gun title.
Oh, yeah. A Million Ways to Title in the West. Let's see what else is going on.
All right, now I'm uploading, and I believe I'm actually uploading the entire show today, unlike yesterday. Which, again, I think I caught it fast enough. At least my safety check is working. So
Right.
there's that. Tech news for May 8th. Tech news. Or
I
at
wouldn't
least
interrupt this
tags.
These are
This
my
is-
favorite stories. Air Force discusses how it would respond to Godzilla. I love the Air Force. This is a story that, like, when I'm going through Feedly, I am like, I can't read this now, but I'm loving reading this later.
Yeah. All right.
And they talk to the Air Force in Japan.
Oh, good. I mean, that's responsible journalism.
That's amazing. The Air Force said 4,000 segways and slingshots.
Wait, so Hawkwood came in, dropped our title, and then left the chat
Yeah.
room.
Nice. That's like a title drop.
Dude, that's hardcore.
That's a title drop.
Yeah. Oh,
But title drop, leave the room. Done. All I'm saying, almond coffee.
yes, we're going to
Today
get
is
almond
ever-
coffee and talk about peering.
Almond coffee.
Don't you wish you could be there for the coffee? Maybe not the peering.
So you know what I learned from reading the other day, which I didn't know, and I'm still debating whether it's true.
There's lots of things that you could have learned from reading. I would have no
I
idea.
know, but this one was amazing. I did not know that Baz Luhrmann. Is it true that he wrote the the epic 1999 graduation song, the one about always wear sunscreen, or did he just do the music video?
The what?
Now I
Huh?
have to learn.
I don't know any
Sorry,
of these words.
I'm having a whole conversation in my head. Baz Luhrmann.
I don't know who that
There's
is.
You don't know who Baz Luhrmann is?
No.
He did the Great Gatsby movie. He did
Okay.
the movie about Moulin Rouge. He did Strictly Ballroom.
Okay. All right. Strictly Ballroom guy. Got it.
Yeah, wait. Always wear sunscreen. I think he wrote the lyrics.
And he wrote what? Such a
Sorry,
man.
you don't have to follow this thread through.
What? But no, now I want to know. What's this? You said graduation song.
Yeah, you remember the song that had like a mock graduation? I'm not going to play it. No, don't play it. Royalties. Hold on.
I can't even hear it. It's fine.
Remember, and the song was like, it was like very like spoken word. Then all of a sudden, it was like, and always wear sunscreen. I'll send you a link.
It sounds vaguely familiar. Yeah.
Oh, of those songs that like drove by in the late 90s. I'm gonna.
I drove by in the late 90s, which is probably why I'm less familiar with it.
I still can't play it because it's going to cost us money.
I didn't come out into the sun much in the 90s.
That's fair. No, it was not PEDS. I learned something. It was not a commencement speech by someone else. I learned that. That's the whole point. Is that I thought it was a commencement speech by someone else, and as it turned out, he wrote it. It was a mock commencement.
That's what we're finding.
That's what we learned.
What we're discovering.
And also that Baz Luhrmann, who did all these big movies and is super awesome, wrote this weird 90s pop song. It's like one of those things that like reassesses your view of the universe. And you're kind of like, I didn't know that. Can you tell this is my plea for an almond coffee? I'm
done with...
I'm just going to start talking crazy until somebody gives me a coffee.
It's not that crazy. I'm done. I'm done.
All right, wait, let me go in and post the...
yeah, you go post the show notes, and then we'll go talk peering. Hey, everybody, thanks for watching. And we will see you tomorrow.